Hey everybody, welcome to BrickVault. Today in front of us, I get to show you guys this custom Lego Star Wars build from the designer Lucas. We have the Imperial Assault Hovertank, or what nobody calls it, the TX-225 GAVW Occupier Combat Assault Tank. That's what I found on Wikipedia. It has some technical name. This is the Hovertank that you saw in Rogue One, and this is one of the very few times that in the Star Wars universe, the design for a vehicle or ship actually looks like it makes sense. It's low to the ground, heavy, got tons of weapons, seems to be relatively mobile, very accurate, and dare I say it actually looks like a combat military strategist actually put this thing together as opposed to making it really high up on legs. Now I'm going to be getting into all of the details of this build in the video, but first I would like to say that if you wanted to build this yourself, you can find the instructions at our web store, www.brickvault.toys. What's included with each purchase is a PDF step-by-step building guide to make this creation, as well as a digital parts list file where you can upload it online and order all the pieces that you would need. Lucas is a really dedicated builder. You might know him from all of his different Batmobile designs in the past, and he did an excellent job poring over the subtle details of this model in order to make it look just as perfectly accurate as possible. Buying instructions from us is a great way to help support what we do here at the channel, as well as the dedicated designers that we work with, like Lucas here. And now let's jump into the details. It's built to perfect minifig scale, and I would say that the set that originally came out, the original Lego set, is almost the exact same size. I think exactly one stud shorter than this one, so they're basically the same size. And then if you want to know the actual dimensions of this thing, it is 7.5 inches long, 19 centimeters, nearly 6 inches wide, which is 14 centimeters, and 2.25 inches high, or 6 centimeters. And with the trooper sticking out, that's roughly 3 inches high, but anyways, it's better to show this thing off next to the other minifig scale creations we have here in the studio. I grabbed as many as I had time to grab. I think there's over 50 now, but everything here scales accurately to each other within the Star Wars universe. The Imperial Assault Hover Tank here definitely looks the most realistic, I would say, compared to any of the other vehicles, and for a small box-like creation, that feels almost refreshing in a certain way. I actually have an idea of a certain diorama that I want to put this in with the much larger Sandcrawler. Now getting into some of the details about this build, you'll notice the 3 orange crates in the back. They're actually built the exact same way that those crates are put together on our much larger Yavin mock, and that's because in the Star Wars universe there are actual just general crates that both sides would be using for storing things, and in this particular case the Empire is using some orange ones for the back of the hover tank. You can take them off though. They rest on the 2 different jumper pieces and also that 2x2 half tiled piece, and I gotta say I certainly appreciate the shield pieces used in the back right there. And now it's time to just kind of appreciate some of the details of this build. There are some angular plate and tile pieces attached to create just about any detail that you could find on the original model. This is just a slightly closer look at the orange supply crate. Someday we'll have a set of just general Star Wars Rebel supplies and stuff like that. The crate would be included then, and all 3 of them fit on pretty snugly, despite the fact that 2 of them are just held on by 1 stud each. When you flip the whole thing over, they all stay in place, and normally so would the gunner. I just didn't actually stud his feet into the model right there. The orange does well to add a bit of highlight and color that juxtaposes against the extremely gray build that we have. And now it's time to get into the handling section of this episode. I'm going to be showing you guys the other functions, any of the functions in the model during the handling section. It's just such a small, easy thing to move around. So obviously you can take the guns and take them off pretty easily. They only stud in there with 1 stud, but there's enough friction for mobility, or posability, I should say. when looking at the front. You can see this little flap comes up. There's an interior, but it doesn't actually fold open. You detach the top. I'll show you in a second. Here you can see the inside. There's a couple of studs for the trooper, the gunner, to stand in like that. So if you just press him down, he actually just stays. So there he is. Flip him over. He doesn't fall out. And as we're looking at the model, you'll see there's tons of greebling from all over the body. Lots of bullion pieces and little studs and stuff attached to the side. Nothing is too weak here. There's a little flap there that can kind of come up. I'll show you that in a second. But aside from the larger guns on the sides, you can touch this model just about anywhere, except for right there. There's a little bit of that plate slash jumper tile detailing is attached just by 2 studs, but it's in a pretty small spot on the model. And you just don't want to pull down on it. So like I said, any custom build of course has its little weak spots. Also that double-barreled little gun in the very front I would say is kind of weak in the same way. And now we are looking at the bottom of the build. The gear pieces rest on these small treads and they sync up really well. This thing rolls pretty much perfectly on a carpet or any surface with some nice friction. Here our light table's relatively smooth, so the treads only kind of halfway roll, and for the most part the thing just kind of slides around pretty easily on a smooth surface. And just as an example, here are a bunch of tries where I was trying to get that thing to slide into frame for the introduction. Not as easy to line up with the frame as you might think. Anyways, it does skid around pretty much on a smooth surface. And now it's time to show off some of the other functions on this model. So you can move the little gun out of the way for the gunner, which is kind of nice. It kind of moves out of the way with a little droid arm there. And at first glance, you might think that you want to maybe stick a minifigure in through the pilot or the navigator's hatch there in the front. You can kind of rest on top there with his arms exposed, but he's not studded into anything, and that's not actually accurate as to how that works. So instead, let's take him out and let's open up the whole thing here. That little side piece is a little delicate, but here we go. Pop, you can just pop the whole thing right out, and this is the interior. You can actually fit another guy inside, sort of lying down. He could be maybe a weapons operator, and of course now I'm trying to get this guy in a seated position with one hand, because there we go. Yep, it's definitely doable. And there he goes. He sits down, you put his arms down, and you can get the top to pop back in pretty easily. We use a slightly older joint piece. That little side part is only attached by 1 stud, so like I said, it's a little weaker than maybe the rest of the model. And as long as of course I've got it lined up and I'm trying to keep it in frame at the same time, yep, it just kind of snaps right back in. And fortunately, even with just 1 stud, you can get the other part of that top panel to fit in really nice and smooth and flush. It matches up extremely well with those wing plate pieces that are built on their sides. So outside of that, that's basically all of the functions that this model contains. You can fit 2 on the inside under the flap and a 3rd guy up on the top operating the gun. Now the baseline design of this Imperial Assault hover tank is probably one of my favorites, partially for the reasons I mentioned in the beginning, because it is kind of a pretty realistic look for a military vehicle, which isn't very common in the Star Wars universe. But secondly, from Rogue One, I felt like the art direction was actually pretty solid, where you get a new version of a starfighter, the U-Wing, a new version of a type of TIE fighter, the TIE Striker, and a completely different vehicle used by the Empire when they're occupying other worlds. I'd say my #1 favorite design feature of this model here, and really what sets it apart from the playset, and also just makes it much more accurate compared to the model you see in universe, is the front flap that hangs over those wing plate pieces that are built on their sides. It's a nearly seamless point of connection. Lucas, I think, spent a very long time making that angle match up perfectly, and it absolutely makes it, for me personally, for the model, because when you look at the playset or when you just look at pictures of this model from the movie. That slope or slanting feature on the front of this hover tank hangs a bit lower than those two barrier busters on either side of the treads. It's one of those small details that when you're paying closer attention, you really appreciate, especially considering how much extra design time and effort went into adding that little angle. And I'd say it's a perfect example that kind of exemplifies the type of build style that we go for models here on the channel. So anyways, if you do want to build this set yourself, you can find the links in the description below. It's at www.brickvault.toys. If you have any other types of Lego creation suggestions for the future, please let me know in the comments below. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone, and we will see you next time at BrickVault.